Welcome to the Suitcase and The Scribe with award-winning journalist Scott Burnside and former NHL goaltender Mike McKenna, a member of the Nation Network of podcasts and delivered by DoorDash.
Hey everybody, Scott Burnside back for this week's edition of the Suitcase and the Scribe. My good friend Mike McKenna. I always love it, Mike, when I live vicariously through you most days anyway, but you're on the road. You're in Chicago, one of my favorite road cities. I know the hotel you're staying at. Well, there's been some epic times in Chicago. That period, between 10 and 15, they won 3 Stanley Cups, went to a West Final, covered a lot of hockey in Chicago. And you were there to see flashes of the old Blackhawks, or is that just really the new Anaheim Ducks? But what were you doing in Chicago? And tell us about your experience at United Center.
I think it was a little bit of both between the Ducks and Blackhawks last night. Blackhawks were really good to start, and the Ducks were just loose. And they didn't get a save in the first from Gibson, and it was 5-0 before you knew it. Man, it was a wild game. Talk about a bit more here in a second. I'd never seen a game in the United Center other than backing up. Yeah. And when you back up against the Hawks, you skate out for warmups, you take warmups, and then you go back in the locker room. Yeah. And as a backup goaltender, you watch the game in the locker room, sitting on a Swiss ball, eating popcorn, and you don't get the full effect. I'd always wanted to be out for the national anthem. I'd never heard the national anthem there. It just, I don't know, man. Chicago's only 4.5 hours down the road from St. Louis. It's an easy drive. I had several calls to knock out yesterday, and I was like, I think this makes a lot of sense to just go, and I know a lot of people here, if I walk up into the press room, I know lots, you know what I mean? Between management and media and everything. So it was just a cool opportunity to come see a game for once and just kind of be a fan as well. And man, I tell you what, it's really cool to have been in the building for something that was historic for Patrick Kane. Yeah. I mean, he's done so much in his career. He's won the Stanley Cups. He's been one of the top scorers, one of the best offensive players. Really in league history, I would say probably maybe the best offensive American player ever. I think he is in that conversation by the end of his career. For sure. And he had 6 points last night, a goal and 5 assists. Yeah. And, I was in the building for that. And like, Scott, I'm going to flip this around to you real quick. I've been in the building for a couple of cool things in my career. Yager goes into second place all time in scoring. I was backing up that game. I was broadcasting the game that Patrick Marleau set the record for games played in the NHL. Some really cool moments. And aside from playoffs, I'm wondering for you, some of those that you've been in the building for that at the time you realized this is pretty cool. Like, this was a special game that I'm attending.
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time, but I was really new to, I had transmogrified from a hard news guy to a hockey guy. And I was a sports columnist in Windsor, and I knew nothing about a lot, but I was nonetheless the sports columnist of the Windsor Star, and starting a run in early 97 when the Red Wings would go back to back in 97 and 98, of course. And I was there for, I think, pretty much every playoff game during that run. I think there was one Saturday night we didn't have a Sunday paper in the final against Philly that I didn't go to, but I happened to get to your point. I happened to be there covering the late regular season game in 97 between the Avs and the Red Wings. And that epic brawl started with, as a result of Claude Lemieux's hit on Chris Draper the previous spring, and Darren McCarty from Leamington, Ontario, and Claude Lemieux. They still the whole thing is epic, and you can YouTube it. But the greatest thing about it is that Darren McCarty pummels Claude Lemieux Turtles, pummels him, does not get ejected, but comes back and, if memory serves, scores the overtime winner. And I know a lot of the guys on that Red Wing team felt that was somehow a galvanizing moment for a team that had playoff disappointments, had been swept in 95 in the final by New Jersey. And they didn't seem to measure up to Colorado, but that was an epic moment. And I had no sense of perspective or anything like that. And, it whatever it was, 4 or 5 months later, they win their first Stanley Cup in decades. And that was kind of cool. So that's one of my favorite moments. So
it's fun because now we've gone in a totally different direction, but I love this because this story time is so cool. I mean, I was in the building when Curtis Joseph beat the living hell out of Tim Shovelday. Like that was a major moment at minimum in St. Louis sports history, but also really in goaltending history.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to anybody that grew up in my era, especially an 83 birth year, anybody who was, over the age of 5 just remembers. And this was even like when things would be on Sports Center, and that's what you would watch because you didn't get highlights daily like we do now. And the call, Ken Wilson, who was the broadcaster for the St. Louis Blues, and here comes Shovelday. And sure enough, they meet at center ice, and Joseph just pounded him. I mean, Shovelday's eyes swollen shut. Fans are going crazy, full line brawl. And I'll never forget that riding back home after the game because my dad's an official scorer in St. Louis, so we have to wait around a little bit afterwards. And riding back, we'd always have KMOX on, the AM station that carried the games. And I hadn't heard the call because I was in the building.
Yeah.
But in the car ride home, in our VW Rabbit that we had to wait for the glow plugs to heat up to drive home, here comes Shovelday, forever imprinted in my mind, Scott. Like, seriously though, is this not the magic of pro sports? Isn't it? To me, we watch sports because we want to see something happen that we would never expect. Is that not the essence of what we're doing in sports?
Absolutely. And you're right. And I'll think about it, I'm sure, for the rest of the day, those kinds of moments. And apart from the obvious, the playoff moments or the Olympic moments or whatever, but I mean, I'll remember, talking to Andrzej Kopitar in the mix zone in Sochi in 2014, and Slovenia won their first ever Olympic hockey game. And they weren't going to win a medal. Everyone knew that, but honestly, like that, just the joy of that. So being on hand for that kind of game. So, I'm totally with you. And I like to think, like if you were a fan and you saw Patrick Kane with a 6-point night, I mean, how many people in that building last night, whenever it is next year or the year after, and whatever, when Patrick Kane goes in the Hall of Fame because he's the first ballot Hall of Famer,
no question.
Whatever happens to him, if he ends up finishing his career in Buffalo, how cool would that be? Whatever happens, people in that building last night will think, you know what? I saw Patrick Kane roll up 6 points against the Ducks one night. Team wasn't very good, but man, that was a memorable night.
When you're a fan of a team, it doesn't matter how good or bad a team is. And there was actually a really good crowd last night. That was fun. I mean, for whatever reason, they were celebrating St. Patrick's Day early. So there were Irish traditional dancers there, like a kids troupe of dancers at every single, like seating porthole, where you walk in to go to your seats. Like at one point it was throughout the entire building. Everybody had green berets on. It was pretty wild. Like for a team that hasn't been very good this year in Chicago, I thought the atmosphere was still great. And honestly, it was refreshing, Scott, because I was worried about walking into a completely dead building with everything that's happened in Chicago and knowing that, tickets on the resale market haven't been very expensive to say the least. And from the scandals to Rocky flipping out, Rocky Wirtz having a moment and being difficult. It was refreshing because it's still Chicago. It's still an original six. It's still a team that has a lot of gravitas in this league, and they've got some amazing players still. Yep. And man, they've got a guy in net that's so fun to watch. Marc-Andre Fleury is just an absolute joy to watch, man.
Well, and it's interesting because I already did this morning as we're taping this, our Frank Cervalli, no surprise, but breaking some news that longtime Chicago executive Norm McIver, who'd gone to Seattle, will come back as the associate GM and part of that hockey ops department there with Kyle Davidson. And I've known Norm a long time. He's a really good man, honestly, and not to go too far down the rabbit hole. One of my favorite Norm McIver moments, we were in an airport during a playoff run, and I was with Chris Stevenson from the Toronto Sun, and Chris Stevenson told the story about how, because Norm McIver is part of those first really terrible Ottawa Senators teams. And when they were on the road, the reporters.
And there was a lot of people that have gone on to big things in hockey that were members of those teams. We could rattle them off afterwards. Continue.
Yeah. But on the road, apparently the writers and some of the coaches and staff would go and play shinny after an off day practice or the morning skate.
How cool.
Chris Stevenson would use Norm McIver's skates. Like it was like, hey, Norm, we're going to play some shinny. Do you mind? Yeah, no problem. And but I just remember we all had a great chuckle about it because nobody's going to borrow Sid's skates, go out for some shinny, right? So that's not happening. But anyway, pleased for Norm to return to Chicago and part of the process there. But I wanted to ask you, because I really, for a long time, believed that this was the Anaheim Ducks, that they were going to reassert themselves in the Western Conference and that they were going to, they played so well for so long. I'd written a piece early on about Troy Terry and his breakout season, and man, they cannot find their way. And Pat Verbeek, the new GM there, we're now inside 2 weeks to the trade deadline. He's got a lot of moving pieces to try and figure out. And I know, in the reporting on Daily Faceoff, he's really he's open to listening a lot. There's Josh Manson, Hampus Lindholm on the back end, Ricard Raquel up front. All three of those are important players, but all on expiring contracts. Pat Verbeek can't have those guys walk away in the offseason as UFAs. So he's got some difficult decisions and some work to do over the next 2 weeks. The Ducks really seem to have disappeared beneath the surface.
It's been rough lately, and I didn't think I'd be concerned about them. I thought, if anything, the Ducks would stay in contention this season because they played so well early, and I felt like their young talent wasn't the only thing carrying them. It was kind of pushing along everybody else. And last night it just didn't look like they had it. And it's tough not having Ryan Getzlaf in the lineup. You're missing a huge ingredient there. But like Troy Terry had a tough night. You noticed him a ton. You noticed him offensively. Like he had some great looks at the net, but he was also -4. So the defensive side of things for the Ducks just wasn't there. The detail wasn't there. They hit, but it didn't feel like they hit with a purpose, right? Like the hits weren't generating the turnovers on the puck that you needed. It was more like they were chasing the game against Chicago. And I look at that young talent and think, man, like it's there. You watch Zegras with the puck. Holy cow, But I am concerned about John Gibson. I can't help but think that he has not updated his game, Scott. Like as an old goalie, it's hard for me to look at what he does in the net and not think that teams haven't figured this out. He ends up in the splits. He ends up outside of his posts, and it was 5-0 before they knew it last night. And so, this is not all at the feet of John Gibson, but I'm just concerned there. I'm not sure that that's seen the growth necessary to compete with this. And I think for Pat Verbeek, man, you really have a lot to think about now. Like Lindholm, by all means, would be a great pickup at deadline. Like teams need defensemen. He would be right there in my eyes with a Chychrun, who it was a different dynamic because of his contract status, right? But like Lindholm, Sherratt, like, boy, if I'm a team trading for Hampus Lindholm, I'm thinking like trade sign, like that's what I would want to do to keep him around. If you could, I would not want him as strictly a rental. I would want to keep that player. And up front, even like, what can you get for Raquel? He's kind of been an enigma sometimes, hot, cold. Like, I think it's turned from the Ducks being pretty set to now them being sellers straight up. Yeah. And that's kind of surprising and frustrating because, man, I thought they were right there. And I believe in Dallas Drake, I think he's done a good job, but they were not good last night, Scott. Yeah. And Chicago looked energized. They were fun to watch. You go back to the first half of the season or third or whatever it is. And I like Dallas Eakins as the, potential Jack Adams guy. And I'm a big fan of Dallas. He's such an interesting guy. And,
there have been so many changes with the Ducks and with Bob Murray leaving abruptly. But you're right. And the John Gibson thing is interesting because he's locked up long term. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating. And so the other, you mentioned Jacob Chitrin with the Arizona Coyotes. That was, to me, we had a little exchange on our daily face-off Slack last night. Phil Kessel keeps the Iron Man streak going. We played one shift, had a shot on goal, fist bumps his guys, leaves the game in Detroit, jumps on a charter jet and back home to celebrate, hopefully. And I haven't seen any news on it, but the birth of his first child. So congratulations to Phil Kessel on becoming a dad. And I know there was some feeling. Well, is it what is that really in the spirit of the Iron Man streak? Is it meaningful? Does it matter? I thought you seemed pumped that Phil he keeps streak alive. You're okay with that?
Yeah, man. A little insider baseball, a little glimpse into the daily face-off world that we did have some different opinions on what the Arizona Coyotes and Phil Kessel were able to do to keep that Iron Man streak alive. And we won't name names, but there were people that thought it somewhat cheapened the streak, right? He just started the game. Well, I loved it. Okay. I think that going out of their way to do something for a player that has accomplished so much in this game and really from being a top end draft pick to being the punching bag in Toronto, to reinventing his career in Pittsburgh, to getting snubbed for Conn Smythe that he should have won with the Penguins. And in my eyes, he still didn't win it because he's Phil Kessel. And I don't know why.
Yeah.
I love it. And to me, it's respect. I think that's simply what it comes down to. It's respect for a player that's given everything to this game, that's been the ultimate team player to get out there and play no matter what. Yeah. And I viewed it like that. I love that they went the extra mile to make it happen and allow it to happen. And it just wrote a good story. Does it not? You hop the plane, go home, you play your period. And I don't know if this happens on a team that's in a big fight right now, dog fight for a playoff spot.
Yeah.
I don't know if this would happen if he was on the Nashville Predators,
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah. And that's not a slag on the Predators at all. It's just Arizona sucks and they can do this, So I just thought that was awesome, man. I loved it. I know we had disagreeing opinions on it. But who knows? I mean, he may go longer than Yandel for all we know.
Yeah.
And that's Keith's kind of had a tough go this year in Philly, but Philly's not anywhere. I'd expect him to keep going as well. I mean, I think it's just special that we're watching these players have this type of longevity, Scott. And I don't know. I just enjoy it. I mean, he's not the only one around that's had longevity though either, my friend. I mean, Jaromir Jagr's still playing hockey. I mean, he owns a team in the Czech Republic.
Yes.
He's playing for the team. My buddy over there, Landon Bowe, who you know as well from the Dallas Stars organization, has been their goaltender and just laughs every day that he's still playing with Jaromir Jagr. Recently holds a game to benefit the Ukraine and Prague and has raised big money for this. And there's a tie there as well. Old Czechoslovakia, there's very, very open wounds still from the old day of Eastern Europe, the old bloc,
Russian invasion, late 60s.
Sure.
Yeah.
Those are open wounds. And the ironic part of last night is that Alex Ovechkin tied Jaromir Jagr for third all time in goals.
Yeah.
And here are two players that are just at opposite ends of world politics in some ways. And it's just an interesting dynamic for me. That, I mean, really, what more can Ovechkin do at this point? He's a hockey player. He's going to do his thing. But boy, it does show that if you align yourself publicly, you're always going to be under fire, aren't you, Scott? No matter what you do.
Yeah. Oh, well, and we talked about this last week, I think, and I think it's still fair. Even Brian McClellan, the GM in Washington, addressing this issue since we last spoke in this forum. But a reminder that it is difficult for all Russian players in the NHL, and it's hard to know. I think you have to be very cautious in criticizing, even though Alex Ovechkin's longstanding connection to Vladimir Putin is what it is. I have no problem him being asked about it. It's a very obvious and public thing and has been for a long time. But in this moment, I think it is very difficult to criticize and to pile on Alex Ovechkin if you do not understand the potential ramifications for speaking out.
Exactly.
And it's not just Ovechkin, right? I mean, and Artemi Panarin has been outspoken against Putin, and we know what kind of response that prompted a year ago. But for all the Russian players, it's a very difficult time. But to your point about Jágr, it was so beautiful, right? I mean, he packs up his team, goes to the O2 Arena in Prague. The money goes to Ukraine. Years and years ago, I left. I took a leave of absence from my news job at the Windsor Star and spent 6 months it was still Czechoslovakia then, teaching English and doing some writing, and happened to be there when the final armaments of the Russian army were loaded on train flatbeds and rolled out of what was then Czechoslovakia. And we have a picture somewhere in our file, Russian soldiers getting on the train and leaving Czechoslovakia, leaving the country that they had invaded. Why Jágr wears the number he does, and his respect for his family and his countrymen, to have been there for that moment. And wasn't long after that Slovakia created its own company, and so the national split happened. But again, you don't understand what it means to people, their history, and for Jágr to be so cognizant of that, and for it to be so important to him. I don't know. I can't wait till he goes in the Hall of Fame, but he may never go, right?
It might be a while
until he's 60. When's it going to happen? But good on him. And I think I saw a comment from him, again, he's a classy guy. Ovechkin's he's unstoppable, and he's going to break Wayne Gretzky's record. He's got Howe and Gretzky. And whatever the politics, I don't
want us to sound like apologists here in any way, because we're not. It's a realistic look at this. We grew up in America and Canada when we don't face these same types of problems that you may as a Russian if you speak out. You don't, man. We for more or less have freedom of speech in our countries that is pretty wide ranging, and there's not ramifications to having a differing opinion, which I love about our countries. And that's part of the reason why I defend Alex Ovechkin, even if he truly believes that he supports this stuff, he has the right to have that opinion. But man, is he a damn good hockey player. He just continues to go, man. He will beat Gretzky's record. I have no doubt about that. And it's his durability for me. That's been the amazing aspect. He was the proverbial bull in a china shop early in his career, and he still plays hard. He'll still hit players.
Yep.
But he was straight up reckless early on. And he has streamlined his game enough, but he's kind of just built like an ox, and he can survive all that stuff.
Yeah. Big win for the Caps, and if I'm not mistaken, 1,000 games together for Alex Ovechkin and Nicholas Backstrom. I have a huge soft spot for Nicholas Backstrom. He's just, very Swedish, right? He's sort of, always love, he's great. He's a great guy. You sit in that room and he just wants to talk about hockey, and very thoughtful, and met his dad on a couple of Caps dad's trips. So that's quite an accomplishment for two guys. Yeah, listen, Ovechkin's, surefire Hall of Famer, first ballot. In my mind, Nicholas Backstrom, same thing. When it's time for Nicholas Backstrom, he can go right to the Hall of Fame. He can go to my Hall of Fame whenever he's ready. So, I was so excited that you were in Chicago. I should have mentioned off the top, we're going to have Chelsey Goldberg of the PWHPA join us. Chelsey was at a showcase in Washington at the Caps facility just this past weekend. It looked like a great event, and we're going to talk a bunch of stuff. But before I forget, my friend, It's always my pleasure during the podcast to remind our listeners, our viewers, that DoorDash is the proud sponsor of the Nation Network of podcasts, restaurants, and more delivered right to your door. Always glad that when I get that in there, I feel good that we get that in there, and I like, and thank you for reminding me. So there you go.
Well, they take care of me. We kind of had a rough weekend in the McKenna household. We had to visit the ER. I'll leave it at that with one of our daughters. And I tell you what, DoorDash came in very handy for us to get a grease wheel delivered to our house and make lives easy on us. And so everything's fine. Don't worry. But I tell you what, Scott, our family went almost 9 years without an ER visit due to injury with our two daughters. So right. I was happy about that run. I'm not happy that it ended, but life, parenthood, man, it's not easy. And when you have DoorDash in your back pocket, knowing that you can get some dinner, it makes life much simpler, my friend.
All right. Well, it's a perfect segue, that glad that everything worked out. And also it's a great honor, and looking forward to chatting with Chelsey Goldberg, who is ready to join the Suitcase and The Scribe. All right. Now I'm going to call you Chels because I feel that now you're part of the Suitcase and The Scribe Daily Face-Off family. But Chelsey or Chels, thank you for joining us, and already an MVP in our books because you're on the West Coast and it is painfully early. I know you've been traveling back and forth. You were part of that the great showcase in Arlington, Washington area. Thank you for getting up early and coming to chat some hockey with us.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I'm still recovering, honestly. Obviously, a quick trip, long flight. So I have a DMV appointment soon, too. So that's why I was like, got to get ready. Got to mentally prepare for that one, too, right?
Where is home base? Sorry, are you in California?
Yep,
so
born and raised out here.
I can imagine the DMV's a real chore once you head there. So
yeah.
What was your youth like growing up in hockey? Because to me, like coming from a market in St. Louis where I'm from, women's hockey, girls hockey is still growing. It's not big, even in 2022. So, when you were a kid, what was that landscape like growing up in California?
Yeah, so for me, I actually had to grow up playing with the boys. It was basically my only option to start. I mean, my twin brother and I grew up playing roller hockey together with all of our friends. And then when it got too hot outside, we moved to ice hockey. And from there, some of our coaches along the way encouraged us to pursue hockey further. They said we had the potential, the skill, the drive. And so from that point on, our minds kind of shifted into the more competitive playing aspect. So from there, I stuck playing with the boys until, I want to say like bantams or midgets, one of the two. And then at the AA level, when they all kept growing and getting stronger, bigger, I actually got hit pretty hard, got a concussion. So at that point, I was like, you know what, maybe it's time to switch over to girls. The problem with that was that the only girls team was, like 2 hours away. And with traffic, it was just craziness out here. So it was a huge commitment for me to really decide to play women's hockey. And so fast forward a little bit, after a year or two out here of women's hockey, I got seen by a team in Vermont, North American Hockey Academy, so Vermont. They asked me if I wanted to play with them on their older team. They had one more spot. And so all my cards were kind of just aligning like that. And I moved east at 16 years old to finish my junior and senior year of high school out in Vermont to play. And then from there, I signed at Northeastern, got a college scholarship, and hockey took me east at that point.
Well, so I want to go back to your brother in a minute or two, but you mentioned playing D1 hockey at Northeastern, and then you played professional hockey, part of the Professional Women's Hockey Players Association. But it's not been easy. If I'm not mistaken, did you not break both fibulas, one leg 1 year, the other leg the next year? Do I have that right? And it strikes me as that would be unpleasant.
Oh yeah, no, you're very accurate about that. So I broke both fibulas a year apart, almost to the day. It was like the first one end of January, second one like that first week of February the following year. So it was crazy timing. at that point, I got really fortunate that I had already signed at Northeastern. So it was a matter of me calling my Northeastern coach to be like, hey, so I just broke my second leg. And he's like, you know what, Chelsey, we know how hard you work. You're going to overcome this. And he actually honored my scholarship still. So really, really powerful and respectful. And I think that kind of gave me more motivation to obviously overcome each injury for myself, but also for my coach who is putting that much faith in me. You know what I mean? So I was ultimately out for 4 years just due to some complications with prolonging of healing, surgeries, 2 surgeries, hardware put in. I got mono 1 year with it. It was crazy. So 4 years. And then my junior year at Northeastern was my first year actually playing, I would say, a full season after 4 years in a row. So it was pretty gnarly, pretty intense.
That's unbelievable that you were able to, one, get your body back and having the ability to play at such a high level, but mentally to go through that. Like, how did you manage to stay focused on the task at hand? And then, to come out and end up playing pro afterwards, like, it's not like you just got through your college career. Like, you were successful enough to make a way in the game to be able to do this now. That had to be, was it that much of a hard process, or was it really just your passion in life and that you knew you had to keep going forward?
At that age, my goal was to be on the Olympic team, the national teams growing up. So I was in the under 18 program for USA Hockey. I had goals to make it to the Olympics. I had the skill, I had the talent, I had the motivation, the work ethic. When I broke my legs, I think that was the hardest part, was knowing that those dreams were kind of at least put on hold for that point in my life. And, it was the hardest, I guess, shift mentally, because while it was the hardest time in my life, I had to mentally overcome that too. And I think that was harder than actually training and healing and getting physically back in shape. I think it was mentally getting back in shape was where I struggled the most. But it was also the best learning opportunity for me. It humbled me out, made me a better person at the end of the day. And I wouldn't take it back for the world. I mean, obviously not being in the US program after that was really hard for me. But I think because of my positive attitude and my motivation to continue to overcome those injuries, it honestly took me to the professional level. And so for me, when I signed pro after my Northeastern days, that to me felt like my college career was starting, right? Because I had lost those 4 years. So signing pro was like a new chapter for me to really enjoy the game again. It was hard for me. My body changed, my playing style changed after I broke both my legs. So I would say now I'm a whole different player than I was back then, but I have to do the things that I can control, my speed. I'm a very smart player. So those are the little things that I try to focus on each game now.
So Chelsey, I alluded to the fact that you were I think you were playing at the Kettler complex, right? At the Capitals training practice facility which is on the top of a mall in Arlington. It's the greatest place. As part of a PWHPA. I always have to, because I'm a former president of the PHWA. So anyway,
okay.
What was that experience like? Because just from reading and following on social media, it sounded like a great turnout and a real chance for your group to connect with lots of young girls and people in the hockey community. And I wonder what that was like, because the whole women's hockey landscape is, it's very fluid, right? I think it's fair to say there's never been a time when there has been as much attention and focus and, sort of the profile of women's hockey as a whole has never been higher, but it's still a very fluid landscape. So I wonder what your experience was like in Arlington and what comes next for you in terms of the group's events.
It was an amazing event. So this is year 3 of striking for us. The PWHPA formed once the CWHL, or the Canadian Women's Hockey League, folded. Right. So I played 3 or 4 seasons in the CWHL. And then we got a message one day that from our commissioner at the time that, our league was folding, and that in turn we were going to fight for a sustainable league, which is what we deserved. So 200 plus of us. The majority of Hockey Canada, USA Hockey athletes are on our side, and we all formed together to join the PWHPA to fight for a league where we can make a sustainable living, and not have to work full-time jobs. So year 3 of striking, what we're doing is these showcases to spread the awareness of what we're doing, showcase women's hockey at the highest level. And this past weekend in Washington was a huge success. I mean, we had youth girls come out. I actually had a young girl that I had met and helped at one of my best friends who won the gold medal at the previous Olympics, not this past one, but the one before that. I was helping at her camp, and I was introduced to this one young girl who has dreams of playing college and obviously pro after. So she flew from Boston to Washington to watch Amanda Pelkey and I play. And to me, that's why we're doing this, right? It's for the future of the game. It's for these young girls to have a place to play post-college while they're training for the Olympics, and a place where they can dream about playing. So it was a huge success. The Capitals welcomed us and with full arms, and were great hosts. They took us to the Caps and Kraken game, and they honored the PWHPA players at the puck drop, which was amazing. Their social media handles were really supportive of us, and it was just such a great weekend overall.
I feel kind of a kinship to what you guys are doing in some ways, because I've got 2 daughters that are age 6 and almost 9. The oldest of which is playing hockey. The youngest is going to, for sure. Unfortunately, they both want to be goaltenders like I was. I don't think I've been able to derail that plan just yet. We'll see how it plays out. And I also had experience sitting on the executive committee of the Professional Hockey Players Association. From the union side, I understand what goes into it for you guys. What's it really going to take? Like, if you could put your big picture hat on here, you could run the league, you could be in control of everything. How does women's hockey get the professional game off the ground into a successful level where my daughters can now say, I don't just have the Olympics. Now I have professional hockey that I can truly look forward to as a career choice, because my youngest one really wants it. She wants to be paid to play hockey. She keeps telling me that. So what's it going to take for that to happen in your eyes?
We're so close. I actually think, I have hope, I have faith that very shortly in the near future, we will have a sustainable league. And I mean, ideally, it looks like take the WNBA model or the the soccer league model, right? Like, they're very successful, and there's no better time to invest in women's sports than now. So I think we are so close to making that happen and making that possible. And I think ideally, right, if we partnered up with each NHL team, it would look amazing, right? Like a brother-sister franchise, playing at those arenas with those fans. And, maybe it's like we play before, they play after. I don't know what that model looks like, but I can tell you that we're so close, and our hard work playing in the PWHPA, all coming together to fight for one thing, sustainable league at the highest level, is coming together. So I'm pretty confident. I'm really excited for it. And I just want a place for, like you said, your daughters to be able to play. I think that would be incredible.
All right, Chelsey, before we let you go, to me, it's just so fascinating. It's not like you don't have enough on your players, but you are actually a member of the California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, Southern California Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. And because you mentioned your brother earlier, you have been spearheading work to open up competition for women's teams at the Jewish Olympics, which are held in Israel every 4 years, coming up in July of 2022. You tried to, because there were no women's hockey teams that were in the competition, you tried a couple of times to play for the men's team, but were denied, which I don't think is fair. But through your hard work and the hard work of others, there's actually going to be women's competition this summer. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about just the process there and how important it is that this is going to happen, that the competition has been expanded for such an important event.
Yeah, so my Jewish heritage has always been a huge part of my life. Very proud to be Jewish. My grandparents were very conservative. They kept kosher temple every week, so we kind of followed in their footsteps, and it was a really cool honor for me to be inducted into the Jewish Hall of Fame a couple years ago. And with that in mind, I also watched my twin brother play at the past two Maccabi games in Israel the past 8 years now, because it's every 4 years, just like the Olympics. And I was like, why can he go play, but why can't I, right? Like, I played college, I signed a pro contract, I want to play too, right? So I asked if I could play with them. They said no. And that kind of lit a fire under me to make it happen myself. I was like, you know what? If they get this opportunity to join the top Jewish athletes in the world to come together for one of the largest sporting events in Israel or worldwide, I'm going to make it happen for the women. So I actually got introduced to one of the chair members of Hockey Maccabi through my brother, and she has a couple daughters, and one played at BU, so she gets it. And she and I took this project upon ourselves, and fast forward 8 years later, with a lot of prospecting, a lot of spreadsheet work. I have an ongoing spreadsheet that I've been working on, and basically what I've been doing is reaching out to former teammates that I know are Jewish, or if they have friends that are Jewish hockey players, to send them my name or send them to me, get their names, contact info gathered on the spreadsheet, and in hopes that we collect enough interest to pitch it to Maccabi that, look, there's enough support and interest that we can take women's hockey to the next games, right? And so after many, many conversations, and then we got Maccabi Canada involved, it's finally happening. We finally have enough support where we can field a USA, Canadian, and an Israeli hockey team, women's hockey team. So it's crazy to think that it's finally happening, coming together, but such a big accomplishment. I know I'm so excited to play. And I know the other athletes that are playing on the women's hockey teams are also stoked about it too. So it's pretty incredible.
That's amazing. I mean, I think back to several of the Jewish teammates I've had, and it's always, they've always considered it kind of a special club in some ways, because there's not as many, Jewish athletes within hockey that we've seen. And it seems like that is something that is really a big point of pride and fellowship. I mean, I remember playing with a teammate of mine, Mike Zabriger at St. Lawrence, that the few NHLers that were of Jewish heritage, you just looked up to them. So, I mean, for you growing up and kind of having that leadership role, are you looking forward to, in some ways, being that leader that young, Jewish girls can look up to and say, hey, here's my path, here's my way to go play over in the games in Israel as well?
Absolutely. I think you said it best. There's not many Jewish hockey players. I mean, if you categorize us in our own category. And so I think when I meet another Jewish teammate or hockey player, it's like an instant bond or connection, because it's not as common. So it's a really special feeling when I know that all these Jewish athletes, in addition to all the women's hockey players that will be present at the next games, are coming together over something that we can all relate to. I'm sure we can all relate to the fact that there are not many fellow Jewish athletes in our given sport. So, it's super exciting. And I think, my grandparents are no longer with us, but just thinking of how proud they would be is I think what's motivated me to make this happen even more.
Great. Chelsey, this has been outstanding. And you have been on top of your game, even though it's at the crack of dawn in Los Angeles or in California. But really, thanks so much for coming and sharing your story and to continuing the discussion about women's hockey and women's Jewish hockey. It's been a real treat, and I wish you nothing but success moving forward. But thanks for coming and hanging out with us.
I appreciate you guys. I love chatting. I'm a chatterbox, so I could talk all day.
You found two individuals here that don't mind it either. And sincerely, thank you, because my daughters really look up to people that like yourself that have done things to further the conversation and make it a better place for women's hockey. And I hope that they get to see the benefit of what you're doing now. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, guys. I really do. Thank you.
Mike, that was outstanding. I feel empowered. I feel like I know way more than when I started this morning. And so thanks to Chelsey Goldberg for joining us. And that's a name we will continue to hear about in not just in women's hockey, but in hockey as a whole. I think someone with that much drive and that much going on, but a ton of fun.
Ambition is a really important thing in life, Scott. And you can sense that with Chelsey, that it's there. And I love doing our shows and meeting people because you just never know what'll come of it. And, you know, just even talking offline afterwards, or, hey man, it'd be great if my daughters could meet you. And that's important to me. You know, you need to have role models. You need to have people to look up to and to actually have that impression maybe someday would mean a lot. So I was really happy she could join us, especially because the women's game, like, quite frankly, needs all the help they can get this pro league started and do it the right way. So I certainly hope that happens in the near future. I love watching the women's game, man. Even at the Olympics, that was a highlight for me. It's phenomenal hockey.
Truth. All right, let's close things out. Our little mailbag segment going on here, my friend. And let's see, got a couple of Edmonton Oiler questions this morning. Oh, things that Oiler team never far from the drama line, right? I mean, you know, they look like they're a little bit better defensively in the last few games, and now they can't score, and their power plays. I don't know what's going on. So this first question, will Ken Holland's job be in jeopardy if he doesn't upgrade the Oilers' goaltending? That's a good question. You might even expand it, just upgrade the Oilers as a whole, maybe. But and the question sort of expands to include a potential trade deadline ad of Semyon Varlamov. Another year left on his deal with the Islanders, but you know, probably someone who doesn't fit long term for the Islanders. What do you make of the job security for Ken Holland? As we speak here, the Oilers no longer in a playoff spot. I'm going to confirm that right now, but tough times for the Oilers as we approach the trade deadline.
It's amazing how our conversation has shifted from the Oilers winning the Stanley Cup to just making playoffs. And if that's the threshold for success in Edmonton, I don't like the prospects of Ken Holland being there much longer. I don't have any other way to say that. And if he doesn't get a goaltender by the deadline, I think that amplifies every bit of question, because he needed to get a goaltender last summer and it didn't happen. And this has been a slow burn building towards this that we all saw coming. It was like the steamroller in Austin Powers going 2 miles an hour coming at Austin, you know, at the character. Just, you knew it was coming. And I mean, Varlamov, I thought it'd be a great fit, but here's the problem. Everybody in the league knows that the Oilers need a goaltender. The Oilers, I just said the Oilanders, but there's a coin, a term. Everybody knows that the Oilers need a goalie. So they're not just going to give away their asset. You're going to have to, Ken Holland now has to overpay to get a goaltender.
Yeah.
And I'm going to project here a little bit. So forgive me, everyone, and forgive me, Ken Holland, if I'm being inaccurate here, but my impression is that Edmonton thinks that they need to get a named goaltender. They would need someone like they would need Marc-Andre Fleury, Jonathan Quick, Braden Holtby. Take your pick, any of those names. Even you could toss Semyon Varlamov in that mix. But I think the price of those goalies is so high, again, because some of those teams don't need or want to get rid of those goaltenders. And you're going to get crushed on it trying to make that deal. I think Varlamov would be a great fit in Edmonton, but he's got a year left.
Yeah.
And it would cost a lot. And it's Lou Lamoriello. He's not going to give him away.
Doesn't have to.
I mean, I honestly think Edmonton was crazy that they haven't traded for Anton Forsberg. To me,
I knew you were going there.
I'm sorry, $900,000. What can you lose, man? The ship has sailed. No one in that market believes in Mikko Koskinen. Mike Smith, if he was ever not hurt, would maybe have a chance at this. But even his play's been up and down this year. Like, Forsberg's sitting top. Can we stop arguing the fact, like glossing over the fact that Forsberg is sitting the top 10 in save percentage in the league on a team that doesn't play great defense and outplaying a guy on a $6.25 million contract of Matt Murray by like a decent margin? You know, it's got label. It's labels, man. Like Forsberg, oh, maybe he's not an NHL goalie. Well, he's probably a backup goalie. Not the way he's playing right now. Give the man the credit he deserves. So anyway, I honestly, I'll be surprised if Holland doesn't get a goalie. I think he's in trouble. I do.
I knew you were going to Anton Forsberg, and I love that idea. Here's the thing: if you're the Senators, aren't you trying to lock him up? Right? Like, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing: you got Murray on $6.25 million deal. You got Philip Gustafson on a one-way next year, so that bumps you up to already $7.25 million, and you're probably going to have to spend well over $2 million to get Forsberg. So if you're GM Pierre Dorion, do you want to have $10 million potentially tied up in goaltenders on a team that may not be contending or is on the verge of it?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what happens in Ottawa with Forsberg.
I think that, yeah, because I like, and I know it's, sometimes it's hard to, to gauge, how close an emerging team is. I like that Senators team a lot. And I think they could be right on the cusp next year. I mean, they're going to be battling Detroit and Buffalo. I think if you get the goaltending right in Ottawa, that team's going to be right there.
They have to spend to the cap and they have to get quality players. Yeah. And I'm not sure how you get quality players right now with that market, with the uncertainty and with kind of the vibe of that place.
Yep.
They're not going to do it just with the young players, although they have some great pieces. Yeah. Stützle, Tkachuk, Shabbat. I love Connor Brown. That was a great trade for them. Drake Batherson, phenomenal. And on a really good contract for that team. I think he's just under $5 million for a pretty long term, which is good. So it's there. But they got to spend money in Ottawa if they want to be competitive. There's 20 teams in the league against the cap, and guess which teams are the best?
All right, buddy. Again, terrific. You know what? Next week when we tape, we will be in the final days before the trade deadline. So excited to see, what happens. Maybe nothing happens between now and next Wednesday, but things are going to happen. I know it. And I can't think of anyone I'd rather discuss it all with than you. And good work by you as always. Safe trip home from Chicago, and we'll do it again next Wednesday.
That sounds great. We'll be relying on our own Frank Snervali for sure to keep us updated with all the trade rumors, the trade targets,
anything happening
towards the deadline. We know that Frank's going to be on top of that here at Daily Faceoff. And boy, I hated it as a player, but it is intriguing from this side of media things, isn't it, Scott? So Great work to you this week. Thanks to Chelsey Goldberg for joining us.
Indeed.
This has been a mighty fine edition of the Suitcase and the Scribe.
Agreed.